I found this article online entitled The 10 Rarest Things on Earth, and it features things like the bismuth crystals, dragon's blood trees, and white peacocks. Apparently these are the rarest things to find on this planet, but I'd argue one is rarer than all of them: the Elder Scrolls 6 news. We got an announcement trailer 7 years ago, and since then that's pretty much it. So when we get any news on it, it sends a tidal wave on social media. Even during an Xbox showcase, Todd briefly mentioned that they were working on the Elder Scrolls 6, and everybody lost their minds writing articles. We already knew this, but that's how little comes out and how powerful the brand is. Anyway, I do have some news that I managed to find, and here it is. The Elder Scrolls 6 will last gamers at least 10 years, Bethesda teases. Todd Howard says, "People are playing games for a long time, you know? Skyrim is 11 years old, still probably our most played game, and so we don't see it slowing down, and people will probably be playing it 10 years from now also. So you have to think about, okay, people are going to play the next Elder Scrolls game for a decade, 2 decades, and that does change the way you think about how you architect it from the get-go." So Todd Howard is explaining how their mindset is focused on making sure that the game lasts a long time. Now, this can be perceived as good news or bad news, and as much as I, like everyone, are really excited to finally play the game, this statement actually worries me more than you might think. The reason? Procedural generated content and radiant objectives. Procedural generation simply means the game's content is randomly built, just like Starfield's planets. Radiant is never-ending content, like side quests that are randomly generated. Go here, do this. As a result of this game design, the game can technically live on forever. Now, these two things sound good in theory. Who wouldn't want a game that lasts forever? But I would actually argue that they are one of the main reasons for Bethesda's recent downfall. In this video, I'll explain what I mean and showcase how this quantity over quality approach has damaged Bethesda as the years have progressed. Now, back in 1996, Bethesda had released 2 major games, The Elder Scrolls 1 and 2. Both of these games followed an entirely different model to the Elder Scrolls that you know of today. They were procedurally generated worlds. The game engine would create a giant open world to explore, and everything in the world was randomly made. So, as a result, players had the ability to play the game literally forever, content that never ended. But due to technical limitations of the time, a smaller gaming market, and the fact that the game didn't have as much depth, it didn't sell as well as Bethesda would have hoped. Bethesda reached a critical moment in their history and knew they had to make changes. This change came about by releasing many key members of staff. Key developers Ted Peterson and Julian Lefay both left. Michael Kirkbride, the original writer and designer for the lore of the Elder Scrolls world, moved on, and Christopher Weaver, the founder of Bethesda, sold his share. So who was the front of this new Bethesda movement? Well, the legendary Todd Howard. Immediately, he decided that the studio would change direction and that their game design would be completely different. Procedurally generated worlds? Gone, replaced by handcrafted maps. Randomized NPCs? No more, every character would have a name. Points of interest randomly scattered? Nuh-uh. Now each point of interest would be manually placed somewhere on the map. Essentially, he decided that the model would change and that the Elder Scrolls would now be an open world game based in a handcrafted world full of well-written side quests. His first project was the hugely successful Morrowind. Morrowind succeeded because it offered an unprecedented sense of freedom, depth and immersion with a richly detailed open world, a unique setting and lore that felt alien and authentic. Its focus on player choice, freedom and exploration was a hit. Coupled alongside an Xbox release, the game surpassed all expectations. It sold over 4 million copies, which was 33 times more than the Elder Scrolls 2. Fans loved the new design. Todd Howard had pulled a masterstroke. The fans had spoken and they much preferred the handcrafted world of Morrowind compared to the procedurally generated worlds that came before it. Another important note to add is that no quests in the game were radiant. They were all unique, handwritten, and offered the player many ways of completing them. The game scored 87 from critics and an 8.4 from users. After this, Bethesda decided to stick with the same formula and got back to work. Their next project would be Oblivion. Bethesda had decided to stick to the exact same formula that had made their first game successful, and they just improved it in every way. Better, longer side quests, voice acting was added, the graphics were improved, the world was bigger, and the user experience was improved as well. It was Morrowind again, just a generational leap and improved in a lot of ways. They did not change the formula, only improved upon it. Added to the Xbox 360's early days, this game scored even better with a 94 critic score and 8.5 user score. It sold 9.5 million copies, which was more than double Morrowind's sales. This new Elder Scrolls, reimagined by Todd Howard, was a hit. Fans really liked this new style, and Bethesda were flying at this point. Every location in game was handcrafted from scratch, and every single quest was handwritten, had unique characters, and left an impression. Some argue Oblivion has the best writing that we've seen from Bethesda, but once again, in this game there were no Radiant side quests or procedurally generated content. Fans loved it. 2 years later, and Bethesda delved into a new IP with Fallout 3. Fallout 3 was essentially Oblivion with guns, set in a post-apocalyptic America where players would explore the world and discover its secrets. So, despite being a new genre, it stuck to the same blueprint, the Bethesda blueprint. Once again, fans loved it, and it sold 12.4 million copies, which was 3 million more than Oblivion. It got almost identical scores to Oblivion as well, so Bethesda knew that they were onto a winning formula. Fallout 3 also improved its dungeon design and had more variety, as Bethesda had hired a level designer who would spend time to make sure every dungeon was unique from the others. The game had less quests than Oblivion, but they were all incredibly well written and left an impression. So, Bethesda had done it again, but once again, they'd focused on the same blueprint, improving it with new handcrafted elements and making the game more enjoyable. There was no procedural generated content and no Radiant side quests either. But something happened in this game that would change Bethesda forever. In the main story, in order to finish it, the player had to die and could no longer play afterwards. Fans voiced displeasure over this as they wanted to keep exploring the open world after the main quest, since it's 95% of the content, and people also pointed out plot holes which made the whole player sacrifice feel unnecessary. Bethesda misinterpreted this feedback. Speaking about the player dying, Emil Pagliarulo, Bethesda's lead writer, said, "Let me tell you, players did not like that. And that was really the moment we realized that our fans don't want to play our games. They want to live in the worlds we create. That means their experiences never end, and the content, whatever it is, works together as seamlessly as we can make it." It was at this point that Bethesda would begin to change their formula. They misunderstood player feedback as, "We want games that last forever." Then in 2011, we got the legendary game that is Skyrim. This game far surpassed all of previous Bethesda entries in sales and reviews. Skyrim sold 30 million copies in its first year, smashed reviews, and is genuinely revered as one of the greatest video games of all time. Not to sound like a broken record, but it was just another step up from Oblivion and Fallout 3. Visually at least. It felt sleeker, it was more user-friendly, the dungeons were even more unique, and the world was packed full of things to find. The entire map once again was handcrafted, with point of interest manually placed. Now, you might expect me just to say that Skyrim was perfect and move on, but it was actually the first game where problems began to crop up. Skyrim was the first game to introduce the Radiant quests. Now, the game had over 200 handwritten quests already, but players had the option to take part in Radiant quests as well. Players could go to a tavern and ask for work. The bartender would then say a generic line like, "The Jarl left this bounty," and the game would generate a random objective. Go here and get this, go there and kill that. And once you finished it, you could go and get another right afterwards. It never ended. All of the faction quest lines offered these type of quests. Now, it's important to note the Radiant side quests made up about 3 to 5% of Skyrim. The game itself was packed with handcrafted content, and this was just a bonus for players who had cleared the map. It was not a negative, but just a little extra. This game also took off with one of the most successful modding communities of all time, with over 70,000 mods released since the game came out. The game's success was both a good thing and a bad thing. On one hand, Bethesda knew their formula still worked, but on the other, Skyrim was so much more successful than any of the previous games, and it never expired. Oblivion calmed down. Fallout 3 saw its player count drop, but Skyrim stayed relevant and is still relevant today. Was it just because it was a great game, or it came out at the right time, or was it because of the Radiant quests and the modding community? One couldn't be sure, but Bethesda certainly felt like it was the latter. Fast forward to 2015 and Fallout 4 dropped. It followed the same Bethesda formula of a handcrafted open world and it sold well, but something was a little off. Bethesda had added Radiant quests, but a lot more than Skyrim. Whereas Skyrim's quests were about 3 to 5% Radiant, Fallout 4's number was more like 30 to 40%. The Brotherhood of Steel? Radiant quests. The Railway? Radiant quests. The Minutemen? Oh, the bloody Minutemen. They were so radiant that there are even memes about how Preston always says another settlement needs your help. Randomly generated objectives with no real storyline were no longer just an added feature, they were the main draw. The game also introduced settlement building, where players could build bases, and it wasn't just a little add-on, it made up a huge chunk of the content. Bethesda still had enough of their original formula to make fans happy, but their over-reliance on Radiant side quests and never-ending content watered down a lot of the quality, opting instead for quantity. As a result, this was the first game that really divided fans, with a user score of 7 out of 10. The writing felt subpar, and rather than deep, well-written side quests with branching storylines, Bethesda gave fans never-ending fetch quests. Their obsession to make never-ending content was only just beginning, as next we got Starfield. 5% of Skyrim's content was Radiant, Fallout 4 around 30%. Starfield was almost entirely Radiant. The planets were procedurally generated and they never ended. The dungeons were drawn from a small bank, then placed randomly on planets, leading to repetitiveness. And the quests? My word, most of Starfield's questing was Radiant, from planet scanning to bounties, all the way to ship flying. Most of the game was designed this way. This was the first game where Bethesda abandoned their blueprint and leaned into never-ending content. But this ended up being their downfall because the magic of all their previous games was that every side quest felt unique and had a story, that every point of interest on the map was different and guaranteed new experiences, that everything was worth your time. Starfield destroyed this as planets lacked personality, dungeons became copy-paste, and exploration was unrewarding. If you can't guarantee something unique for players to find, why would the players spend time seeking it out? Starfield received a lot of criticism and is considered a disappointment. Now, Starfield has a lot of issues, but for me, that lack of rewarding exploration, the guarantee of new secrets around every corner, was the biggest letdown. After the success of Skyrim's modding scene, Todd Howard promised that Starfield was a modder's paradise. He had left so much open space for modders to fill in the content, but the mods never came. Skyrim was a great game that mods enhanced. Starfield didn't even attract a crowd big enough to enjoy the mods, so they stopped arriving. Todd had become over-reliant on mods, expecting them to essentially fill in the game. Bethesda had finally made their vision of a game that never ends, but the issue was, nobody wanted to play it. So this all takes me back to the quote that Todd Howard had about The Elder Scrolls 6 and making it last decades. I worry about this quote because it's sort of planning backwards. Now, don't get me wrong, Todd Howard has developed 7 successful video games and I'm still at 0, so in reality, he's much more of an expert than I am in game development, but I do feel this is the wrong way to think about things. People don't play a game for 10 years because it's designed to last 10 years, but because it's a great game. People still play The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2 and Elden Ring, but these games weren't designed to last 10 years. In reality, it's 50 to 80 hours worth of content and players just keep replaying it. Why? Because they're amazing games. DLCs, expansions and mods can extend the life of a game, but the game has to be good to begin with. People don't play games for 10 years just because they never end, they play them because they're great. My worry is that over time we have seen Bethesda become more and more obsessed with Radiant quests and never-ending content, and you can definitely see a correlation between the amount of this content in the game and the review scores. The more there is, the worse the score. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe procedural generated content can work. CD Projekt Red don't have this in their games, because their games don't fit this formula. MMOs are successful solely because of this content, and Bethesda have used it successfully before as well. I think the trick is the balance. Skyrim did it right because the game was all handcrafted and offered so much. By the time you finish the entire game, you're talking hundreds of hours, and for players who wanted more, they had those Radiant quests. It was a bonus in that game, not the main feature. It added to the experience but never watered it down. As Bethesda has continuously added in more Radiant content, aiming for high quantity, the quality has dipped. In their quest to make their games longer, they have ended up killing their lifespan. We all want The Elder Scrolls 6 to be great, and the only thing I hope is that Bethesda makes the game the Bethesda way. Go back to the original blueprint of handcrafted open worlds, full of handwritten quests and unique dungeons. Make Skyrim again. You can still have in a small amount of Radiant quests, but make sure they're just a feature and not the feature. Make the game great, and the fans, the modding community, they will give the game longevity. They will add the bonus content. But right now, the focus shouldn't be on trying to make a game that lasts forever, but a game that captivates and continues the legacy of Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim. Same design, just with newer graphics in a new setting. Do that, and the fans will ensure that the game's legacy lives on, and that people really will have a reason to play it for decades to come. But anyway, that's it for this one, but what do you guys think? Do you feel like I'm reading into this too much? Have you noticed the growth in Radiant content in Bethesda titles? And do you love it or do you hate it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I'm Av Gaming, where we do video game analysis, identifying what makes great games great and what could make good games great as well. Thanks for watching. Av out.